The monster taming or creature collector genre includes the ability to catch creatures, train them, and use them to battle. The first game that immediately comes to mind is Pokemon. However, it isn't actually the first game to use this gimmick. In 1985, a small game called Cosmic Soldier had a feature where the player can recruit allies such as aliens by speaking to them. In 1987, Digital Devil's story Megami Tensei features the ability to entice demons to join their party and aid them in battle. Dragon Quest V also shared monster recruitment and taming mechanics, which would later spin off into its own monster taming game called Dragon Quest Monsters in 1998. But it wasn't until 1996 where a financially struggling video game developer studio by the name of Game Freak would release a little game called Pocket Monsters, exclusively to the Japanese market. It sold almost 5 million copies in its first year. Nintendo and Game Freak would release a trading card game and an anime, which both became instant hits. Western versions of the game would come in 1998, where the rest of the world would see and fall in love with Pokemon. Currently, Pokemon is the single highest grossing media franchise of all time, beating Star Wars, Harry Potter, Marvel Cinematic Universe, and more. The most recent title, Pokemon Legends ZA, sold an impressive 5.8 million copies in its first week, whilst the last main title, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, sold a total of 27.15 million copies, making it the 6th most purchased game on the Nintendo Switch of all time. With the success of Pokemon, Game Freak would release Generation 2 in 1999, with new Pokemon, a new region, and new features such as new types, breeding, the Pokegear, and a day-night cycle where different types of Pokemon would spawn in, and most interestingly, the introduction of shiny Pokemon, where for a very rare occasion, a Pokemon spawn in with a different colour. Generation 3 would come in the year 2002 with an even bigger roster of Pokemon, an even bigger new region, and double battles, all possible due to the new Game Boy Advance console. The Pokemon games will continue this trend of releasing a new game with a brand new region, new Pokemon, and new features to help distinguish and improve the player experience. This trend continues on to this very day. What about non-Pokemon games? The answer is kind of boring, as even with the success of Pokemon, other games in the genre are not really common. The majority of similar games come from Japan, such as Digimon and Dragon Quest Monsters. Unfortunately, they couldn't quite capture the Western audience. It wasn't until the mid to late 2010s where Western indie companies attempted the genre with some early examples which include small mobile games like Nexomon and Evo Creo. In 2018, a small Spanish video game developer by the name of Crema would reveal a very promising game in the genre, Temtem. Their Kickstarter was very popular. While their target was to raise $70,000, they managed to raise almost $600,000. Temtem would release on Steam's Early Access on January 2020, where it sold an impressive 500,000 copies in its first month, and in 2022, they managed to sell 1 million copies. Temtem is very important because it started off a monster taming genre surge, where many more indie studios would attempt this genre for their games. Today, the monster tamer genre has a strong number of new games coming in consistently. Unfortunately, it seems as though most games do not make a big dent in the genre due to a lack of interest. One game that has escaped this curse is an early access game by the name of Power World, which is currently sitting at an overwhelmingly positive overall score on Steam. It also has a strong 50,000 concurrent players, most likely due to the fresh ideas and content added to the game, such as integrating crafting survival mechanics and a satirical take on the well-established story of Pokemon. Harold has proven to the rest of the world that Nintendo is not the only console to play creature collectors on. Hopefully many more talented developers will attempt to put their own special spin into this highly underrated genre. When it comes to the fandom of the genre, there is no denying that Pokemon dominates this area. It has so many different types of fans that do different things, such as game let's plays, tournaments, fan challenges such as speedrunning a game, Nuzlocke challenges, countless amount of fake Pokemon and even fake trading cards, and of course, many impressive cosplays. Some fans are even so dedicated as to create ROM hacks where fans create their own games using existing Pokemon engines, code, tiles, and sprites to create something brand new. Some even start from scratch in other engines such as Unreal Engine and Unity to create amazing fan games such as Pokemon Gamma Emerald. The reason why this genre is so popular can be explained by Bartol's theory, where he proposed that there are 4 different kinds of players: killers, achievers, socializers, and explorers. If you take a look at Pokemon as an example, it fits perfectly into the killer genre, as the main aspect of the monster hunting games is to defeat the opposition. It's perfect for achievers, as they can set a challenge to catch all the monsters. Explorers can go on an adventure in a brand new region in almost every single title, and you can trade with other people for all the socializers out there. There is another theory by Henry Jackson that a fandom of a series are actually active participants and not just passive consumers. This theory goes over how fans create their own content by using parts of the series for their own use, which I have already talked about. However, the theory also tells us that the fans themselves steer the direction of the game, something which can definitely be said for Pokemon, as Game Freak has tried addressing some complaints such as making Pokemon games more open-ended, something which happened with Scarlet and Violet. Currently, unfortunately, it is a disappointing time to be a Pokemon fan, as many consumers believe that Pokemon games have definitely been lowering in quality, something which can be seen in the user scores of the games. Despite this, Pokemon games are still reaching record-breaking sales. Okay, now time for just personal opinions. This one's going to be a lot less scripted. Personally, I am a massive fan of Pokemon and therefore the monster taming genre. I remember watching Pokemon as a kid. It used to be one of my favorite franchises alongside Spider-Man and stuff like Dragon Ball Z and Naruto. I really enjoyed my time watching Pokemon, so much so that I actually became a part of the fandom for the series. I remember when I was a kid, I personally used to make my own Fakemon. Like, I used to draw so many different kinds of fake Pokemon. I would like post them on the internet. I would like check my comments. Again, this is when I was a kid. I haven't done that in a long time, but I do remember that as a very strong kind of moment in my life. I really enjoyed being a part of that fandom. I of course also watched the Pokemon anime as well. I remember definitely watching the first generation, although I was very young for that. but my memories mostly come from the 4th generation. That's kind of where my brain comes back to, and that's kind of when I was when I was a part of that fandom. I also, of course, played the video games. I remember my brother gifting me his friends Pokemon Reds. That was my very first experience with Pokemon games. This was way later on anyways. I think Generation 3 have already come out. I think Generation 4 might have already come out. But I remember playing that. I remember being very excited for Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum. I can't remember which one. And I remember being able to get a copy of Pokemon Soul Silver, which was a massive kind of like biggest hype points of my childhood, I remember. And I just really have a lot of fond memories of Pokemon. Not only that, I also remember getting a Dragon Quest Monsters Joker, which is a spin-off of a spin-off, I suppose. So obviously, I did try to get that Pokemon-esque feeling in other games, but obviously that wasn't very common back then. I remember having a lot of fond memories of that game as well. So I've got a lot of strong emotions towards this franchise. Whilst I have definitely fallen off of it, I do come back to it every now and again. I still haven't completed all the Pokemon games, so I'm not a true fan or whatever. But I still enjoy keeping up with it. And I enjoy the current take on Pokemon, but I'm also a little bit disappointed with it, and I kind of don't really care for the direction. I really do wish they would really hammer it down and like make amazing games again that truly amaze people, as opposed to quickly releasing it. With that being said, apart from Pokemon, I do think we are in a moment of this is starting again, right? This is where the Western companies are starting to get involved. A lot of games were popular, like Temtem was a massive thing when it launched, released. Unfortunately, it's fallen down. There were other games that were also successful, Coromon, Nexomon, but again, they've all fallen down. The only current game still standing is, of course, Palworld, which I was surprised to see has got 25 million copies sold, which is similar to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I knew it sold well, but I didn't know it sold that well, which means that there is definitely potential for indie companies and maybe AAA companies to maybe take a look at it. There is an upcoming game called Anima, which I'm very much excited for. It looks really cool, it looks beautiful, and I'm hoping it's going to be very good. I do know Game Freak has actually been working on a game that isn't Pokemon related at all, which is definitely interesting, and we'll have to see how that goes. Maybe that is them kind of trying to get some knowledge on higher production values so that they can put it into their own video games.